some basic introductions. If we can kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves. I know that Lindy Lee, who is one of the national delegates, will be joining us half an hour from now. We expect this to go about an hour or so long. It's really just an opportunity for you guys to speak directly to voters, give your own message. We're not really interested in any kind of political policy debates or anything like that. We just really want to hear what you guys have to say directly, to voters themselves. So looks like we have one more from Christian Democrats of America joining us. If we could start maybe with Jessica DRASS from Biden for President and our own working class hero, Jacquelyn. You guys can introduce yourselves. Then we can kind of go around the room from there and make some basic introductions. Sound good?
Sounds good. All right. I'll go through it. Sounds good. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah?
It's a little muffled, but yeah, it'll do.
All right, let's see. Is that a little bit better if we do that?
Yes, much better.
All right, cool. So, hey, everybody, I'm Jess. I'm here with Jacquelyn. As you can see, we're going to keep these on for now since we're in the same space together. So I am from South Jersey, just outside Philadelphia. And so I drove up to North Jersey to meet with Jacquelyn to do this today. So my name is Jess DRASS. I am an art therapist and I'm on faculty at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. So I teach art education there. And I'm also a volunteer at Biden headquarters in Philadelphia. So I've done a lot of volunteer work, and I'm really excited to be here with y'all today.
Yes, you have. Everybody. Jacquelyn, for anyone that doesn't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and let everyone know or remind everyone who you are.
I'm Jacquelyn from the New York Times. All I do is work security there, but I escort all the VIPs. I just happen to be on the same elevator with Joe Biden, escorting him to a meeting, and that is the beginning of the story. I'm just here to really listen and kind of learn. I'm still in the learning phase for a lot of things as far as voting. I do get my own opinions, which are not given to me or I'm not paid to do. I'm just kind of freely doing it for goodwill and for humanity. That is it.
Thanks, Jacquelyn. Yeah, you've been a force to be reckoned with, and I think that you were a figure for the everyday average American Joe, Jen, or Jacquelyn. Working class heroes like you make up about half of the country, so I think that you speak to a lot of people. I noticed that Christopher Purcell just joined. Christopher, would you like to introduce yourself? I've never met you myself, so I'm interested to hear all about you.
Sure. Hi, Chris Purcell. I'm with 43 Alumni for Biden, colleagues with David, worked with David at the White House. So I was at the communications office at the White House for 6 years and with the State Department for a year and a half. And I've worked in Republican politics since I was a freshman in college up until 2016. So this is a little bit of a foray back into it. Because it's just too important to stay on the sidelines.
Yeah, when I was looking at your LinkedIn, I see you've had quite the career since then. So forgive me for leaving that off of the information there because you're accomplished. But for these purposes, I wanted to focus specifically on your time in the White House and how it relates to 43 alumni for Biden. So yeah, we're very happy to have you, especially coming from the George Bush White House. You bring a unique perspective. I know that we have David as well.
I'm David, obviously, also representing 43 alumni for Biden. I was the White House Internet Director for about 2.5 years in the second term. Prior to that, I worked at the U.S. Department of Education particularly on No Child Left Behind. We worked a lot with the Hispanic community to help close the educational achievement gap, to make sure that every child had all of the tools and resources to be successful through reading and writing from early education all the way through up through higher ed. And like Chris, I've been involved in politics since I was in high school, actually. My first campaign was for Bush Quayle in 1988, and I interned in the White House in between my junior and senior year during the Bush Quayle administration, and then was lucky enough to serve alongside Chris at the White House from 2005 to 2007, and I'm now in the private sector. And like him, we felt compelled to get back involved in the campaign because it's too important to sit back and watch. We feel like Joe Biden would be the best president for the country, and so we're working to do everything we can to make sure that happens.
Would you agree that this is an unusual, to say the least, election, that it's so necessary that moderates, party line Republicans, conservatives, and people who hold these beliefs to be part of their core ideology feel the need to get involved, that we're in that much distress? Would you say that is unusual?
Yeah, I think, it's not unusual during the primary process to look at all the different candidates and try to figure out who among those candidates you align with, right? So there might be someone who might be too conservative or not conservative enough, or someone who doesn't really kind of go with your views on the world or how style. What's happening here is that to be attacked so outwardly from within your own party, particularly at this point in the election, just a few weeks away, quite frankly, a few months away from the election, it's very unusual. Usually super PACs don't form against the sitting president unless there's something that people feel pretty strongly about. So I think in that sense, it's unusual. And we saw some of this happen in 2016 as well, this fight between, quote unquote, established Republicans and those who, supported Trump. And I think it became pretty clear early on that it was not about the country or the party for President Trump. It was about him. And I think we've seen that, play out here during his presidency. And that's why a lot of us feel compelled to put politics aside and say, listen, we might not agree with everything that Joe Biden stands for. And we can debate those policy issues later, but we've got to step up and do something now to restore that honor and dignity to the office so that we can get someone in there who can lead the country the way it should be led and that we deserve.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the most recent tactic that they're using is to, paint Joe Biden as this radical leftist, Antifa anarchist. And I've just been seeing this over the last week, and it's ironic because, throughout the Democratic primary, we were painted as almost Republican, that we're the moderates or the establishment that they were trying to take on from the radical left. So I think it's interesting now, and a mistake, frankly, if they want to win, for them to be switching and trying to paint him as this ultra radical leftist that wants to tear down the government, because that's not anything that anyone has ever seen from Joe Biden. We hear the words of people like Lindsey Graham, who ideologically are, would be opposites. They would be on, debating on the floor, policy. But gentlemen, as gentlemen with honor, with dignity, with respect, as a human being and as personal people, I believe it was Lindsey Graham's quote that said, Joe Biden is as good a man as God ever created. That's the kind of civility that I think the American public is craving right now, and is really missing from this White House administration, and from our leadership, that we feel as a ship with no rudder. And I think that does, like you said, stretch across party lines. That it's not just Republicans that feel that way, disaffected Republicans. It's not just Democrats that feel that way. It's across the board. Americans in general, I believe, feel that we are a ship without a rudder, that there is no real plan. And it is a presidency about me. And when you make the presidency and the Oval Office and your entire administration about one person, it leaves out a whole lot of people. So again, I don't want to preach from the pulpit here. That wasn't my intention to, bring you guys on to shove any agenda down anyone's throat. I believe we have one more guest with us, who we have Republicans for Biden. There we are.
There we are. So my name is Christopher Traska. I'm a college student at American University. I don't know if you can read the t-shirt, but that's where I am. But I'm currently living in the beautiful Garden State. And so the group that I'm in charge of is College GOP for Biden. And so we're a group of Republican college students who are dedicated to, pushing it back against the narrative that's two things: pushing back against the narrative that Joe Biden is struggling with the youth and struggling with young voters, because I think that's one of the more significant things you see in the media, which is, oh, Joe Biden has this enthusiasm gap and he has this gap with young voters who aren't excited by him. And so we're trying to push back on that notion as well, but also pushing back on the notion that college Republicans and college conservatives are, overrun by these, trigger warning concerns and all these little social stunts with Ben Shapiro and, Milo Yiannopoulos and that type of wing of the party. And so really trying to push back on both of those narratives. And so, we're really concerned about it. We've had some blowback from, college Republican groups around the country, college Republican groups at American University, who, harangue us as, insufficiently conservative. And I'm sure all of you can have some sort of identification with that experience. But so really we're concerned about how the Republican Party on college campuses is often viewed, because campuses across the board on both sides are often kind of hotbeds of, more radical thinking, hotbeds of more sort of anti-establishment thinking. And so, on the left, we see it as a lot of, you got your college communists, college socialists, and other stuff. But on the right, it's just as prevalent. We see a lot of people who are more concerned about, owning the libs, more concerned about, stunts and, pissing people off than they are about really effectuating conservative change. And so part of our mission is both to get Joe Biden elected and to do what we can to drum up youth support on college campuses for that, but also trying to push back on the narrative and try to reshape the Republican Party from the youth perspective in our image of compassionate conservatism, as opposed to this more, publicity stunt,
Sensationalism.
Sensation. Yeah. That I was looking for the word and I couldn't think of it. So thank you for filling me in. But so that's kind of our twofold focus, which is really both the immediate threat of getting President Trump out of the White House and getting Joe Biden into it, but also once that happens, because it has to happen, focusing on saying, all right, how can we reconstruct? How can we build the party back up to push back against these sensationalist, wings, push back against these sort of cultural wars, these identity politics type situations, and really rebuild the party back into a place where young people and disaffected moderate to disaffected liberals can cross the aisle and say, hey, this is a great party. This is a place where I want to be. So that's kind of our mission, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to have you. It is very important to have young people. You guys, the next generation. I may have a baby face, but we are not the same generation. and you are the future. So it's good to see and it's good to have. We want, for anyone joining this that is confused or knows very little about the modern Democratic Party or Joe Biden Democrats in general, we want a healthy democracy. We don't want to see the end of the Republican Party. We don't want to see the end of conservatives. We need you guys for a healthy, functioning democracy. And people like myself used to be considered centrists. Now we're considered moderates, or, by some standards, I would be considered ultra liberal, which I think is just bananas. But I'm someone who prides myself on, I voted, to the 43 alumni for Biden, I voted for George W. Bush for president. I'm proud of that vote. I'm sorry if a lot of liberals don't understand it, but there are reasons, strategic, calculated reasons why I'm proud of that vote and why I voted for him on purpose. And there are a few mistakes. There are a few things that I'm not pleased with that I think that we still pay for now. But all in all, this was a good man. This was an honorable president. This is someone who I never went to sleep at night thinking that he was a bad person. This is someone who I always felt truly wanted to be a good president and truly wanted to be a president for all people. And, you know, policy-wise, there may be differences of opinion, but I believe in a healthy democracy, you do need both, and you need both to be functioning well. I think that's what we have in Joe Biden. I think that Joe is someone who has a bond with these people, who has a friendship on a personal level and has that level of respect and dignity that, you know, it used to be an admirable, desirable quality to reach across the aisle, to be able to work with both sides. And we're not seeing that at the moment. That's become, you know, kind of a no-no. That, you know, everything is ultra divided and we don't want to work with each other. And these guys, the bad guys, and then those guys, the bad guys, and everyone is, you know, fighting against each other. And nothing gets done that way. In my own personal view and ideology, I think that it would be healthy, you know, if we boil it down to basics, just fiscal ideologies. I think that it's healthy to switch. I think that we're supposed to cut spending. I think that we're supposed to reel it in. I think that we're supposed to do these things from time to time and give breaks to big businesses and stuff like that sometimes. And then I think it's healthy to help the worker, the average everyday American Joe. I think that we need both. If we had just one, it would be a radically different world, and it would not be a democracy at all. It would be bad for America. So, yeah, that doesn't sound very radically liberal to me.
Well, and quite frankly, Chris, it's what our country was predicated upon. I mean, anyone who does any research into the founding fathers of our country, you know, they didn't agree on everything. There was, you know, very deep debates about who we would become should we win our independence and become our own nation. And the spirit of those debates and the history of our country, as we decided along the way who we wanted to be, and that is a constant, you know, evolution. And that's the beauty of our country, is that when you live in a representative democracy, we have the freedom to view different things. That the liberty is what makes it so great. And we want to be open to different viewpoints, and let this be a battle of ideas, and let the best ideas win, right? Let present your facts. But that's not the culture we're currently experiencing right now. Facts are being presented and they're being ignored. Science is being presented and being ignored. Politics is being played and literally putting people's lives in danger, because we have people at the highest level of government who are ignoring the experts in the health fields about what's going on with the pandemic and what needs to be done for the sake of getting the country back to work. And yes, we want the country to get back to work. And yes, we want our kids to go to school. But we want to make sure that they're safe. And we want to make sure that 135,000 people who have now died, that doesn't increase to 240,000 people by November, which is currently what is estimated. So this is the problem, is that if you voice a concern and say, hey, listen, I don't agree with the fact that the president's politicizing these health and these science issues, that suddenly I'm a far left-wing socialist because I have concerns about the health of American people and how we're, you know, the fact we didn't prepare for the pandemic and that we're not responding to it are two different things, but both were mishandled. And really what we're talking about in the next term for President Trump is that he's asking for a second term. This is like a job interview. And based on his performance, I think it's pretty clear that he does not deserve another 4 years. So that's the case that needs to be made. And so we can argue about policy, as we talked about earlier, and we can have differing viewpoints on how we approach things. We all want what's best for the country. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Trump supporters, Biden supporters, independent, everyone in between. We want the country to be successful. But at the end of the day, we want a leader who we can believe in, who has integrity, character, and the art of compromise to get things done and to move the country forward. That's what we want.
That's a dirty word.
Yeah.
Compromise is now considered a dirty word. We don't we don't promote that as civility, and I think it's something that we need to get back to that we lost. compromise, if you compare it to something like marriage or a good business deal, compromise is necessary. You need to both be moderately happy or both be moderately displeased. If one side is skipping away giddy, that's not a good deal, and it's not going to last very long. I think that in Trump's bid to seek re-election, I don't know what kinds of emails his supporters get other than propaganda, which plays into the sensationalism and the clickbait. But as far as plans and policies, I haven't heard anything at all. It does seem like what Joe Biden has said. It does seem like he's kind of given up on actual policies and plans and solutions, and kind of taken a back seat that hey, everyone's against me and blah 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 blah. By the way, did you hear about whatever crazy bit of sensationalism, some journalist that praises him has to say, and the focus becomes that. The focus becomes that sensationalist article or that sensationalist video that drives up ratings and gets clicks. And the problem with that is it's not real, at least from my perspective. And again, I only speak for myself here. I don't speak for the Biden campaign. I'm speaking as a private U.S. citizen. These are just my own opinions. But I don't see any real policy coming from him in the way of a solution. And ignoring things that we know are happening, that we know are facts, it's willful, it's intentional, and it's hurting people, just like you said there. Christina Forrester, were you able to sort out the Bluetooth?
Hopefully, is this any better?
Yeah, it seems better.
Okay, great. Hopefully this will work. So I am Christina Forrester, founder and director of Christian Democrats of America. And we really exist to show the nation, really, and the world that, yes, there are Christian Democrats in this country. There's a lot of us. And that it's not only possible that you can be a Christian and a Democrat, but it's very likely, especially in today's space and in what's happening right now with Trump and where the religious right has basically taken a turn down complete immorality. And from a scriptural perspective, from a biblical perspective, and from just a basic human decency, moral perspective, it's much more likely that as a Christian, you're going to vote this time for a Democrat. And we've seen since 2016, thousands of evangelicals, people who voted Republican their whole life. I can't tell you the countless emails and people who joined our Christians Against Trump / Christians Against Hate group. Since the group grew by 30,000 right after Trump's inauguration. And our overall numbers grew by about 50 to 60,000.
I was one of them.
Yeah, thank you. And you're one of our loyal Twitter followers. I appreciate it. And so many of the people that have come in have been moderates, have been Republicans, voted Republican their whole life. I've got the story over and over and over. I was a Republican. I've always never voted for a Democrat. I'm a Christian, or I'm an evangelical. And now I'm starting to question a lot of what's happening with our party. I can no longer, as a Christian, validate this president. I can no longer stand behind my party because they are violating my values. They're violating my values as a person of faith, and I can't both be hold on to my values and vote Republican at this point. And so it's encouraging to see. I mean, we always hear that statistic: 81% of white evangelicals voted with Trump. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we've been talking about those reasons over the last 3 years. There's a lot of reasons that happened, But a lot of those folks have become very disaffected and are looking and I believe looking at Biden in a way of seeing someone who really is upholding and talking about values in a way that is a biblical way. And if you're a Christian, then you should be very strongly looking at what's happening right now in the country and what Biden is talking about in terms of unity, in terms of bringing the country together, in terms of compassion and morality. I mean, Jesus said that the first commandment, the most important commandment, is loving your neighbor as yourself and loving God. So we have essentially abandoned that in the far right conservative Trump supporting space. They have essentially abandoned that entire premise of loving our neighbor as ourselves and taking care of the least of these. And so if you just taking those basic principles and you see and compare what Trump has done and said and what Biden is doing, has done in his entire career, and said, whether Biden was your first pick or not, and I get that too, it doesn't matter at this point, whether, as far as that, Biden has throughout his whole career fought for the least of these, and he has shown these values. And I'm excited about what I see happening, and I believe that that we're in a good place to take this country blue in 2020.
My own take on this is that I think what I've observed, and to give people a little bit idea of how I'm able to observe, I have a pretty massive social reach. I've reached about 9 million voters through our everydayamericanjoe.com website. My own, we have dogs too, it's okay. I've reached about 9 million voters through our own efforts with everydayamericanjoe.com. We don't make any money. I don't accept any donations. It's not even a business. It's just a website to provide supporters with campaign content. And we try to, go state by state, cause by cause, and really have something for everyone. It's a fairly broad reach, but also in my own career and in my business, I've been working for 21 years now. I've built a lot of business relationships, and I've worked for a lot of companies. Owning my own business, I've had something like 500 clients that include the Oakland Athletics, Pixar Animation, some fairly noteworthy clients, and a lot of little businesses spread out all throughout the country. So not only do I get, an ear to the street, so to speak, across the country in red states and blue states in middle America, flyover country, the Rust Belt, the Bible Belt, all over the world, all over our world. I also, have worked for these people and have, bonds and friendships with people who differ and live in a completely different region, where, the culture is different. I feel like I have a pretty good read on that. And what I see, and again, this is just perspective and my own perception, is a difference in interpretation of Christianity and Christian values. I consider myself a Jesus Christ gospel Christian. I say it that way. It sounds odd, but I feel like I have to say it that way now, because I need to clarify that, I seek to follow Christ and his principles, not just the church, not just these rules or, rituals or, principles, or directions or, obey, some human leader, but I seek to follow Christ and what he said. I see the Sermon on the Mount and Beatitudes as, his entire teaching. He gave us his own gospel. He told us what to do. He told us how to behave. He told us how to act in this life, not in the next life, but in this life. And character is something that Christ was very concerned with. These stories and these parables, I believe that, he told them that way because a parable and a story is something that just about anyone can understand. You could be the most intelligent person in the world, or you can struggle, to comprehend basic things. And you can understand a story. Everyone can understand a story. And I don't see these principles at the forefront of what most Americans consider Christianity these days. I see, we are anti-abortion. We are, anti-gay, we were anti-this, anti-that. I see these things being, associated with Christianity rather than, Christ's own commandments. You mentioned love thy neighbor. It's a concept. It's so simple, but love thy neighbor as thyself, right? And I find us, in 2020, in a cultural climate that, to me, seems as if our motto is love yourself, forget everybody else. And that's not Christian, at least, nothing that I ever have read or have ever heard of Christ, nothing about that should ever be called Christian. And it makes me angry. It upsets me. Just as a young man a second ago was talking about, we feel like we're under attack, for these principles that we hold sacred, and they are under attack in a sense. When we talk about a battle for the soul of the nation, we really are. And I don't want to see what another 4 years of Donald Trump and his perversion, in my view. Again, I only speak for myself, of what Christian values are. He's speaking from a pulpit, and whether, it's a church or not, people listen to him. And he has the ability to control the narrative for a lot of Americans. And I worry about that. I worry that we're becoming a nation that is very selfish, very self-centered, narcissistic, and has lost a lot of connection to our fellow human beings, our brethren. That we don't view, each other as brothers and sisters anymore. We view each other as the good guys and the bad guys, and we're all Americans. None of those values add up. I can't reconcile any of them with Jesus Christ. David, are you on?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I would, love to hear, what you have to say about, anything as it relates to Christian Republicans and conservatives.
Well, look, on the faith piece, I mean, I think, whether you're Christian or not, I mean, I happen to be a Christian, but there are a lot of, amazing Americans and folks who care about, various things who are not religious as well. And so, it doesn't matter what your background is, but I think, it was interesting. I was looking through some of the speeches that George W. Bush had given over his 8 years, and looking for former presidential speeches in general. And I came across the eulogy that George W. Bush gave at his father's funeral at the National Cathedral here in Washington, D.C. And I believe it was 2018 when that speech was delivered. And as he was giving the remarks, he was walking through the character traits that his father possessed. And not just as a president, but as a human being. And what was interesting is that sitting in the front row were, of course, the former presidents and first ladies, as well as current President Trump and Melania. And I couldn't help but think to myself, what a juxtaposition of a dichotomy of it was, hearing about this person who had dedicated his life to public service. And of course, no one is perfect, but had, really embodied a lot of those principles about giving back to your fellow citizen and serving, really understanding the value of public service, and that he got into it for the right reasons, right? He didn't get into it for power and ego. He got into it because he wanted to serve, and that instilled in his family similar motivations, right? His son Jeb was governor of governor of Florida, and his other son was followed in his footsteps as president. And we're seeing now another generation of Bushes that may follow potentially as well. And so I think that that's a pretty good track record. But these qualities that, and when you have a memorial service in a church, you do that for a reason, right? Because it's a somber setting, but it's also appropriate to honor someone's life. And to hear George W. talk about his father, and then they would cut away and show pictures of Trump and Melania, and I just couldn't help but think to myself, this person, in my view, doesn't embody any of those principles. Now, I don't know him. I'm not here to judge him. I don't know his heart and mind, and that's only for God to do. That's between the president and God. But I can tell you that I can make an assessment based on his actions. and how he leads, or in this case fails to lead, I think speaks volumes about where his priorities are, both as a person and as a president. And that's why I think it's important for us to act more than ever to kind of, we can agree on policy issues, but if he's not the right person and the right messenger for the party or for the country, then it's clear that we need to make a change.
I agree with that. I know we have Lindy Lee, who is a national delegate. She'll be joining us soon. She had a mandatory meeting for delegates, and she is both Asian American outreach for Biden for president and Christian advocate. And I'd like to hear, some of what she has to say as well. But there was an iconic speech from President George W. Bush, where he tried to tamp down those flames of hatred and division that Vice President Biden was recently just speaking about in one of his latest speeches.
Chris, let me add this. You may remember that right after 9/11, President Bush was very concerned about the fact that perhaps people would be targeting those Muslims who are practicing Muslims, who are good people, peaceful people, and he was worried that perhaps there would be a backlash against them because some radical Islamic people took actions that did not align with their views, right? So one of the first things he did is he went to a mosque. Chris, was it a mosque? I don't remember if it was. Yeah, it was a mosque. So one of the first things that he did is he went to a mosque and delivered a speech and made it very clear to the American people and to the world that this was not a religious war, that any actions that the United States that we were going to take was going to be in defense of our citizens, to protect the innocent and to protect religious freedom, particularly, and that our target was terrorism and Islamic, radical actions designed to take lives and incite violence. That's what we were against. It was not a religious war. And I think it was important that he did that at the time because it set the right tone and it set the right message. And I've heard it referred to oftentimes in modern history as we look back and say, that's what a president should do, is to set the moral tone. And you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be Jewish, you don't have to be Muslim, you don't have to be a religious person to set a moral tone and to set a standard as to what's acceptable in terms of how we treat each other as human beings and what isn't.
That's absolutely.
If I could just chime in real quick, the difference there, though, is that Trump is not a true conservative. And if you talk to and listen to real conservatives, he's never even been on and hasn't governed as a conservative. Or in this Republican tradition, you compare his policies and how he's outspent and how he is not a conservative president. What he is divisive. So the very essence of what you're talking about with George W. Bush, you look at how Reagan talked about immigrants. So this is not even a Republican versus Democrat thing anymore. Look at how Republican presidents have spoken about immigrants, have spoken about people of color, in our modern history, in our lifetime. And you will see what Trump is. This isn't about conservatism. It's about divisiveness. It's about triggering racist undertones, homophobic undertones, sexism, any kind of division he can stoke, and hate. That's why we call our group Christians Against Hate, and the movement #Christians Against Hate, because this is what he is tapping into. It's not values of conservatism. It is, and that's why really the Republican versus Democrat whole piece of this at this point, I think the lines are really blurred, because what we're talking about is basic moral values and decency and hate, because that's how he's governed. That's how he got into office, is stoking fear, stoking division, and going after that piece of America, that darkness. And that's still what he's doing. That is how he's hoping to win in 2020. And he really has nothing else to go on but that. That's because he has no other wins. That's his strategy. It's always been his strategy, and it still is.
Well, I think if I can add something in there, that I feel like we're talking about we can't really understand a lot of his policy, right? I think the policy is polarization and division. And so it's like, that's the point, is to divide. And so no matter what, like when you divide, you're creating the other. And so then that becomes like this us and them. And the word that you mentioned earlier, Chris, is compromise. And I think that compromise is really the key. But what part of what we're missing in all of these like purity wars, right, of like this ideological purity that's happening both on the right and the left, is that compromise involves a level of discomfort that you have to embrace, right? Like when you go and you compromise, you're stepping into you're not going to get everything that you want. So it's not going to be easy. So you need to kind of have this practice with discomfort. And I think like for me, like I label myself more of a pragmatist than anything else, right? And so we keep getting into all of these places of labels and radicalization and left and right and this us versus them mentality, when really what we need to do is embrace this discomfort and have dialogue and move forward with that. But it's a scary thing to do that. But I think that's what we're doing today, and that's what we're talking about. Like what we said, we don't have to agree on every little thing, right? But we have to understand that, okay, wait, if we talk this through, we can find the best possible outcome so that we can work together and move forward. Because right now, all that's happening is, like you're saying, with the hate, the division, that's the plan. And that's like the only plan is the division. So it's like, I think it's important for us to move beyond that. And I think that's the radical idea, right? It's like, let's transcend that and get in the weeds, have the hard discussions, and do the work.
Christopher, do you feel like the future of the Republican Party for young people is in a little bit of jeopardy if it becomes the party of Trump permanently?
I mean, the party's already in deep trouble. I mean, the Republican Party is facing a demographic cliff, and they are on the precipice of it right now. With the way that Donald Trump has alienated women, especially suburban women, we've seen a flight from the party. It was very evident in 2018. I expect it'll be more so in 2020. Donald Trump, of course, has made very little effort to reach out to African Americans or Latinos. He's made it clear that he has a distaste for immigrants, as long as they're not from Norway. And we've seen his numbers. We've seen his numbers with young voters. And so, where's the Republican Party going to find their votes in 2024 and in, let's say, 2036? The Trump base is old, white, angry men, and they don't have a lot of years left, and their numbers are shrinking as a proportion of the population. So the Republican Party should actually be excited about the possibility or likelihood of Donald Trump losing, so that they can rebuild and reform and try to make progress with non-white voters or seniors. So it's a question of when the party will cease to become a true national party if Donald Trump is reelected and if his brand of politics continues.
And CJ, do you feel like the future for young Republicans and your party is under attack? Do you feel pressure from other Republicans to conform and get on the Trump train? Do you feel like there's a little bit of a duty to protect those values and preserve your party for the future?
And muted. I am sorry. I'm muted.
There you go.
No, I can speak from significant personal experience on that front, where there is a lot of pressure to conform to the not even party line, but just the Trump line and fallen line behind him as an individual. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what happens once, whether it's this year or 4 years from now when he disappears, to see what the party is, because I think that there's a lot of people who just jumped on. They like saying Trump 2020 because it knows they get a rise out of people. And so I think there's a significant room for a Nikki Haley or someone to come along and say, and really put forth a positive vision for the future of the party. And I think that a lot of young conservatives are in a place where they would be able to go along with some of that type of thinking. They're not as anti-gay or as concerned about necessarily those issues. I know a lot of young conservatives, even young Trump conservatives, who are saying, yeah, gay marriage, I'm fine with that. You know, that's totally, there's nothing wrong with that. They have no problem with the way Neil Gorsuch ruled a couple of weeks ago. I think young conservatives are moving in the general direction and in the opposite direction, I think, where the rest of the party is going. So I think that there's a massive opportunity once Trump is gone to really harness that power, because I've seen firsthand the commitment that many young conservatives have to being active, to being out there, they're very technologically savvy. They're very good at getting attention. They're very good at getting their name out there. They're very good at getting views and clicks and things like that. And I think if we can harness that energy into something constructive, harness that energy into pushing for more equitable society, harness that energy into pushing for a better foreign policy vision, as opposed to just seeing if we can get as many clicks as we can because we own some poor college student who showed up at a debate, I think then we could really effectuate some positive change. So I think that I do feel a certain sense of responsibility, and not just me personally, and I think every young conservative who is disaffected by Donald Trump feels the same way, that they have a responsibility to say, hey, look, right, this party and this movement is not about one man. It's not about one man's vanity project. It's about pushing effective change. And I think that at the end of the day, many young conservatives are going to realize, especially if Donald Trump loses, especially if he loses any, because he hasn't articulated a vision. You know, I think you pointed out earlier that he hasn't really said why he wants a second term. He was asked a couple of weeks ago on Sean Hannity, softball question, what do you want to do for your second term? And he started rambling on about some nonsense experience. And so I think once he loses, they're going to see a significant amount of people who are like, oh my goodness, what was that? And they're going to say, he didn't have a vision. He didn't have any specific policy changes or anything that he wanted to have. All he did was piss people off for 4 years. And so I think you are going to be in a phenomenal situation. We're going to be in a really good situation. Back and say, be about, we're going to, those Reagan days where you listen to how he spoke about immigration, you listen to how he spoke about, you know, the intoxicating power of America, and harness that energy again, because I think young conservatives are some of, in many cases, more than young liberals, good at amassing themselves together, good at getting their message out there, and good at putting themselves in a situation where they can effectuate change. And so I think that the Republican Party, once Trump is gone, and I genuinely hope for a wipeout this year. I hope that the Republican Party just gets cleaned out. This way we can take a step back and say, what the heck was that? We're never going to do that again. Dust off the autopsy report from 2012 and say, this is the direction that the country is going. Because look, the country is changing whether people like it or not, right? The country is getting more diverse, the country is getting younger, and the country is becoming more and more socially in line with, I think, where we should be, whether Donald Trump or any older conservative likes that or not. And so I think that we're going to be in a significant detriment if Donald Trump wins again and we commit ourselves to this sort of white identity politics, nativist way of thinking. We're going to be in significant trouble. But I think if he loses, we're going to see a significant change in the way that young conservatives think and act, because I think there's going to be a realization that they were on the losing train, and young conservatives don't like to lose.
Yeah, real quick, let's just fire off a couple questions for you while I can.
Yeah,
do you, you know, obviously we've just seen an 18% jump in young people for Biden across the board, 18% jump. So the quote unquote young people problem that we had apparently was false. We've seen a huge increase in young people jumping on board for Joe Biden. Do you feel like you can go to sleep easily at night with a Democrat, Joe Biden president? Do you feel like you're going to be able to get some sleep at night and know that the country is in good hands?
Undeniably, and I think that's one of the main reasons that I, along with many of the people in the organization that I'm a part of, are so involved in the Joe Biden campaign. And that's because we can swallow 4 years of higher taxes. We can swallow 4 years of maybe some deregulatory policies that we dislike, if it means that we can go to bed at night knowing that the world respects us, and go to bed at night knowing that the person in power has our interests at heart and has everybody's interests at heart, not just 40% of the country that supports him, not just 80,000 people in swing states that support him, but the entire country. And I think that Joe Biden is one of those people that when I go to bed at night, do I disagree with him? Sure. But I never doubt where he's coming from. And I never doubt his commitment to keeping people safe. It's the same way I felt under President Obama. Did I like President Obama from a policy perspective? No, not very much. I mean, I think there were plenty of things that I disagree with him on. But when push came to shove, right, I did not doubt that he had America's best interest at heart. And I did not doubt that he was trying his very, very best each and every day to keep us safe. Same way I'm sure you felt under President Bush. And so I think it's when Joe Biden is president, I will have absolutely no worries about the state of the country. But the one thing I want to say though, is that is specific to Vice President Biden. That is specific to who he is as a person, who he is as a politician, right? If some of the other Democratic candidates had gotten through and gotten nominated, I don't know that I would be saying the exact same thing. And I don't know that I'd be sitting in the exact same situation where I am. So I think part of that has to do with who he is as a person, and part of that has to do with his brand of politics.
Can you think of a single Democrat that would have the unique ability to work across the aisle with Republicans as far right as they come, successfully, respectfully, and come to an agreement and pass laws in legislature? Can you think of a single person other than Joe Biden himself who has that ability now?
I can think of a few. I think that during the primary process that I was kind of watching from a third person perspective, not really involved in it as much, I have no doubt that I think somebody like Amy Klobuchar would have been able to reach across the aisle and get some stuff done. I have no doubt that a person like Pete Buttigieg would have been able to sit down with Mitch McConnell and hash something out. So I think there were several members of the Democratic primary field that would have had the ability to do that. I think the learning curve for some of them would have been a lot higher. For a guy like Pete Buttigieg, who's only 38 years old, I think that he would have been in a significant situation. I think somebody like Amy Klobuchar, who's never been in an executive office, other than if you count her district attorney years, there would have been a significant learning curve there. And so one of the things that really drives me to Biden is, do I think he has a specifically unique ability necessarily to reach across the aisle, have the ability to sit down with a Republican and make something happen? But I don't need somebody who's learning on the job. We've seen what happens when we elect a president who learns on the job, right?
Yes.
I want somebody who day one comes in there, has relationships with people, has relationships with foreign leaders, has relationships on Capitol Hill, and can make something happen, and doesn't have to sit there and learn on the job and appoint people around him who are going to teach him how to do it. Who the second he walks into the Oval Office and he reads that letter on the desk, he's able to run the country effectively. And I think Joe Biden is the only one who has the ability to do that.
The White House, the Pentagon, Congress, all branches of government. This man has experience. He has relationships, and I believe wisdom. And having been in politics, we like to downplay that as if it's a bad thing. I actually think being qualified for the job matters.
I think undeniably,
it's the weirdest thing in the world. There's no other job.
If your toilet was unclogged, it was clogged, you wouldn't call a mechanic, right? You'd call a plumber. I don't understand why our national toilet is clogged.
Because you're the young person in the room here, I have to ask you this. Kanye West.
Oh no. The eternal question.
Are we done experimenting with people who have no idea how to run a country?
Yes, I genuinely believe that most young people, and I can tell you that from anecdotal evidence on my social media feed and then all that other stuff, as well as the national polling evidence, that I think many young people recognize the severity and the importance of this election. And they recognize that this is not just a choice between two men. It's not just a choice between two parties. It's a choice between two visions for where the country's going to focus and the way the country's going to be run. And I think you're going to have a significant number of people who say, I'm not voting for Kanye West. I'm not voting. It's not like 2016 where we had people voting for Harambe and people writing in random nonsense. This is the year where people really recognize that their vote matters, recognize that we have a clear choice and distinction between the two candidates. And I think that young people have the mental capacity to realize that this election isn't a joke. They have the ability to recognize that we are between one serious candidate and a host of morons. And that one serious candidate is Joe Biden. And I don't think anybody with any significant statistical, margin is going to sit there and say when they walk into the voting booth and they're going to not, I don't think any of them are going to say, yeah, I'm going to throw my vote down the drain and vote for Kanye. I think young people truly recognize they saw what happened in Lafayette, Square. They saw what happened in Charlottesville. They've seen what happened at the border, and they say this election isn't a joke. This election is important. This election matters, and my vote matters. And I'm not going to throw it down the drain voting for a rapper, who's, for all intents and purposes, a Trump supporter.
I'll tie that up with a bow. I want to introduce Lindy Lee, but I just want to comment very briefly to tie that little bit up nicely. This is a rhetorical question. Does the Republican Party, the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, are they the crooked Hillary of the 2020 election? Rhetorical.
Undeniably.
Rhetorical. I kind of feel like we're shopping. If I were in the Trump campaign, we're trying to market and shop someone that the vast majority of people see as a bad guy. I threw that out there. It seems to me like you guys have a crooked Trump this time around. You guys have the crooked Hillary campaign, and I got no response but crickets. With that,
I think what people often underestimate is how much Hillary was not liked even within her own party, right? Because a lot of Democrats did not go vote for her. The turnout was not as high as they hoped it would be. Had it been higher, she would have been president. If she had turned out in a few of the states, obviously, we would have seen the difference swing there. But what's interesting about Joe, and I think CJ hit the nail on the head here, that some people don't often think about, is that not only does Joe Biden bring experience from his decades of Senate and from 8 years as vice president, but his standing in the world through his work on Foreign Relations Committee. Like, he's known by leaders around the world as well through both of those experiences. But what people don't think about is the people that Joe Biden will bring with him to the White House. These are all the staffers, all the names that no one knows publicly because they've been quietly behind the scenes doing the work on behalf of the American people from the Senate days and from the White House days, who will come back and know how to run the government. And then he will bring in that sort of set of experience. Whereas when Trump came in, there was a bunch of people from Wall Street, or Trump people, who came in and tried to work with some establishment Republicans on the Pence side and some career officials, and they're all at war with each other. There's like 30%, versus 30% versus 30%, constantly at war. We're not going to have that here. We're going to bring in people who have experience and know how to lead and know how to govern. But no one faulted Democrats for crossing party lines. So why are they doing that to us when we feel that the best candidate is Joe Biden?
Lindy Lee, thanks so much for joining us. I think you had an opportunity there to catch up about what we were talking about. If you could just kind of introduce yourself as soon as you start talking, the camera will be on you.
Hey everybody, I'm really sorry that I joined late, and apologies, my hair is wet. I just ran 5 miles and I couldn't see you guys if I was like all frazzled and everything. But I'm so grateful to join this conversation. You guys are brilliant and incredibly knowledgeable, and I'm really blessed to be with you all today. And Jacquelyn, you are just the embodiment of so much of what we are fighting for. I just want to thank you personally, and I hope you know how much you're loved.
Thank you so much.
Amen.
Yeah, you are a sweetheart. We love you. I don't care what anybody else says. I'm actually tearing up.
Oh my God.
Like waterworks. But we're such huge fans of yours, and we got your back.
And it's so funny because I'm like a huge fan of yours. So I'm
Oh,
just
really?
saying it's a
Oh,
just.
But and everybody, how are you guys in the same room? By the way, I'm really confused by that.
I drove up. That's Jersey. You just drive
Oh, you
everywhere.
went to New York?
Well, I live in Jersey now.
Oh, you live in Jersey. Wow, that is
Yeah.
commitment right there. This
Oh,
food
yeah.
is fantastic.
Anything for our country.
That's
Anything
right.
for our country.
Absolutely. Well, I'm an immigrant, and I think it takes an immigrant to really know how incredible America is. I know I have so much to lose. You know, I said half the things I said in America, I would have been arrested where I was born. You know, there is no freedom of speech. And you see the disintegration of freedom of assembly and human rights in Hong Kong. That is China. There is no such thing as constitutional freedoms there. And I just feel so incredibly blessed to be American each and every day. It's something that I never forget. And Joe Biden is the only thing standing between us and impending doom, I feel like. I don't know if you guys saw Mary Trump said a few nights ago that electing Trump again would be the end of the American experiment. And I couldn't agree more. I'm astounded and frightened every single day. And I realize, you know, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm in Philadelphia right now. And Benjamin Franklin said, you know, the best form of government is a republic if you can keep it. And our hands are loosening. Our grasp is loosening on this republic. And every one of us here is working hard to restore the beauty and essence of America. So I don't want to go on and on, but I just want to let all of you know that I'm incredibly grateful for all of your hard work. And please forgive my wet hair and my late arrival. But Chris, thank you so much for bringing all of us together.
My pleasure, and it's an honor and a privilege to have you all. Lindy, I'm proud to have you represent us nationally at the Democratic National Convention this year.
Oh yeah, so that was another reason why I was late. I'm sorry. We had a delegate meeting, and we took some time to also remember John Lewis, and so the meeting ran long, and I apologize for that. But I'm happy to also talk about anything involved in the DNC. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to explain. I'm a delegate representing Pennsylvania, which I'm incredibly thankful for. Yeah, Pennsylvania is going to be one of the most important states because even if Trump loses the popular vote, it's imperative that we also beat him in the Electoral College. Otherwise, it's all for naught. And, you know, 77,000 votes is what brought us today. So
I think this is a very different election than 2016 with very radically different candidates. In Hillary, and I voted for Hillary, and it was a very, very different election. I'm not one of those that will jump on Hillary bashing and, she's a bad guy, she's crooked, she's this, she's that. I don't really get into that. But what landed for me was that people, said that she's like a robot, polished, slick-talking politician, and therefore untrustworthy. Our fellow Republicans and moderates that have joined us on this meeting today, I'll kind of ask this in general to, all of you, and I think I know the answer, that, Joe Biden is about as opposite of slick-talking politician as you could possibly get. I mean, to me, the quintessential Republican, motto is the kind of guy you can sit down and have a beer with, right? Wasn't that always the shtick? Was that we want an everyday American that you feel represents you on the world stage? And I feel like in Joe Biden we have the polar opposite there. This is a man who's very human, and they like to attack that as if it were as if it were a bad thing. I think that it's an asset. I think that my son suffers from a severe speech impediment. He's been stuttering, since he was about 3 years old. It's getting a little bit better working with speech pathologists, but it's severe. In 40 minutes, he stuttered and stammered 47 times when they tested him, and it's something that he's going to struggle with his entire life. We hear the words of someone like Biden who says, "Don't let it define you." My son also has ADHD. I was also a single father who had to, raise my children on my own. 3 kids, not just 2, but I raised 3 kids on my own. I know exactly what it's like. I didn't take a train like Joe did, but I, drove and commuted 4 hours a day so that I could come home, make dinner, do all these, traditional gender role. This would be the mom, right? I was both mom and dad. I had to nurse my children with a bottle, since the time they were infants, which is unusual, but not unheard of. And when I see someone like Joe, I relate. That resonates. Humanity is what connects us. And when we lose that, when we have these slick talking politicians that have, robotic, answers for everything, I think it's, it signals untrustworthiness. And when I see, someone being very human, I do it all the time. I trail off. I forget what I was talking about. I did it the other day when I was talking to Jacquelyn. I had a quote, and I was like, "Oh, this is a Chris quote. This is a great quote," and then I completely forgot the quote. I do it all the time. That's being human, And humility for me is, someone once described to me that the only difference between humiliation and humility is my ego, right? And if I elevate myself above other people and expect myself to be godlike, that I'm never going to be wrong about anything. And I project this, never wrong, never apologize for anything. Everything I say is right. Everything you say is wrong. I'm painting myself into a corner where it's not okay to be human and it's not okay to have flaws. It's not okay to grow. I think it was a singer in a documentary I just watched recently. Oh, it was the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys. I can't think of his name right now, but the one that passed away from a heart attack. He had a quote that I'm probably going to forget because I'm about to trail off again here. And I did. Yeah, I'm going to have to cut all that because, again, I'm eternally human. I'm learning. And yes, what he said was, I would rather be a hypocrite than someone who never grows. And that's what I found with myself. That there are things 20 years ago I voted for. I'm all the way on the other end of the spectrum now. I've grown. I've learned. I've had more life experiences. We gain wisdom when we're able to learn. But if I just, say that I'm right all the time and to the bitter end, I'm never going to grow. I'm going to have the mentality of a 16-year-old for the rest of my life, and I'll end up 72 years old or 73 years old with the behavior of a teenager who is just never wrong, cannot fathom, the possibility or the potential of being fallible, wrong, or needing to admit that I don't have all the answers. I think those are necessary qualities in a good leader. I think that we saw them in every preceding president at some point or another. I have respect and admiration. I see them all as honorable, except for this one.
Chris, I got to run, but I wanted to share a story before I did that kind of that speaks to what you were just talking about. So when I was at the White House, I ran the website, and we had a feature on there called Ask the White House, and we would bring on various cabinet officials or people in the administration with a unique point of view on policy or something going on in the world on an issue. And we would open it up to the world. Anyone could submit a question, and then we'd have them on for about an hour or so. We would get the questions and they would type out the answers. And I had a gentleman on, he had worked at the White House for 40 years. He was one of the staff members who worked in the residence itself. And I said, hey, I would really love to have you come on and talk about your experiences and all the different presidents that you worked for. And he was happy to do it. And it turns out this was the last thing he did before he literally left the chat, went home, and never came back to the White House again after 30, 40 years of serving. So afterwards, I was talking with him and I said, so tell me, give me a little bit on each president. Tell me something that maybe people don't know. And he gave me his perception, having seen, these people behind, the scenes for years. And he gave different characteristics about each of them, and all of them were fascinating. And I said, well, let me tell you, and this is during the George W. Bush era. So I said, is there something that every president has, like an intangible quality that you think that helped them be successful? And he said, I don't know if it's any one thing. He said, but I can tell you this. He said, whenever a president walks into the room, if everyone feels like everything's going to be okay, then they're going to be an effective leader, right? So I was kind of apply that, it's like, oh my gosh, the president's here. Everything's going to be okay. Like, we'll figure it out. No matter how dire the situation seems, the fact that that person is in the room and exudes that confidence and that sense of we're going to get through this together. And so this is the first time in my lifetime that I've ever felt not okay with the president at the helm right now. And so that was the deciding factor for me when looking at what to do in this next cycle and who to support. I want to make sure that whoever is sitting in that seat and who's ever answering that phone, that the country's going to feel okay that they're in charge.
I believe that as well. And CJ, not to pick on you yet again, I think that that feeling is important for the average everyday American, and I think the young people crave that and are crying out for that as well. The feeling that everything is going to be okay. We don't have that right now on both sides. The radical left liberal, Trump likes to call, everyone on the far left are I'm not all that far from Berkeley. Berkeley is arguably the hippie capital of the world, right? They're not violent. There's nobody hurting anybody out there today. Sensationalism is a little overblown. They don't feel safe. They don't feel okay. And we have that on the radical right as well. These guys who are stockpiling, an arsenal in their home. They're doing it because they don't feel safe. They don't have faith, right? They're afraid.
Yeah.
Why else would you stockpile all these weapons? They're afraid. They don't feel like everything is okay. And so I think, and perhaps you agree, that a leader who makes people reasonably happy, content, and just like David said, it makes people feel like everything is going to be okay, will tamp some of that down, and get us at least to a place where even the furthest radical, whatever they are, is back to a grumble and a mutter under their breath, and not taking to the streets with torches and pitchforks or baseball bats or whatever it is, going bananas in chaos and utter anarchy. I think that, and I think that you probably agree with me on that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to recognize sort of the world in which my generation and young people have grown up to look at the number of blows that they have taken since they were born. I mean, I was born 8 months before 9/11, right? And so I came of age with 9/11, with the financial crash. It was 9/11. It was the 2008 financial crisis. It's the coronavirus pandemic. It's a subsequent economic crash. The second one of our lifetime, and followed by massive racial upheaval across the country. And I think a lot of young people sitting there looking at, in the past 20 years, it's just been blow after blow after blow, and we're looking for somebody who can be up there when they take to the podium. We say, you know what? This is the person that when that 3 a.m. phone call comes and when something goes wrong, that they have the ability to handle it effectively, and we don't feel like we have no power. Because I understand, because I know it's been rough to grow up and look at the world fall, and you have absolutely nothing you can do about it, right? To watch, your livelihood and your economy just crumble to the ground around you, to not be able to leave your house for 5 months because people are dropping dead around you, to not have to witness, in many cases, destructions of parts of cities and stuff like that, with riots and things like this. It's hard to watch. And I think a lot of young people have said for their entire lives, it's been nothing but blow after blow and just chaos. And I think we're looking for a leader who's going to come here and say, I have a plan for it. It's been hard. You haven't been represented. And it's my job to take a step back and say, you know what? I hear you, and I'm going to make sure that the country that you inherit, right, the country that you live in and grow up to and raise kids in, is not tearing itself apart at the seams every single day. You know, in the same way that those hippies in the 60s, right? Think of what happened in the 1960s, right? You had assassinations, you had massive social upheaval, you had the Vietnam War, you had protests, right? Blow after blow after blow. What did they do 20 years later? They grew up and they voted for Reagan because he came along and he said, it's morning again in America. He came along and he said, we have a positive vision for the future. And I think you're seeing that sort of repeat itself now, where for this past decade, right? 20 years, it's been just absolute beatdown. And we're looking for a leader who's going to come along and say, it's morning again in America. I have a plan to lead us through it, and I'm going to get us to the booming 90s on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I think economically speaking, you mentioned taxes. If I can speak now directly to just the American public and all of the supporters of each of these different organizations that are presumably going to tune in when this is published, if I can speak to you directly, we are not interested in taxing everyday Americans. We don't want to tax the middle class. We don't want to tax the working class. I don't want to tax David, CJ, any of these people. This is not who we want footing the bill for NASA. We don't want you guys paying for the military. The full burden of that should not be on the average everyday American Joe. The burden should be on that top percentage. You've made a lot of money. You should be able to contribute a little bit more and pay your fair share. That's it. We're not interested in hijacking anyone's income that they made fair and square. We're not out to, steal anybody's income. Matter of fact, we want to do just the opposite. We want to increase your income. We want to increase your wages. We want to increase what the average everyday American, what their standard of living is. And it's people like Jeff Bezos who, they need to start playing by the rules. They need to, start doing their fair share. That's who we want to tax. So anytime, that's another one of those things that I know you take things personal when people attack the Republican Party. It's one of those things that I take personal. That we're not the party of taxing your mom. We're not the party of taxing the everyday person. In fact, we have a ground-up economy. Keynesian economics is ground up. If the regular, everyday, average people, common people, are doing well, we can all pay our bills. We can buy things. We can save. We can invest, and we can grow. And what happens is that then businesses thrive because of the fact that now we can all go back to Macy's. Now we can all go back to JCPenney's. Now we can all make these businesses thrive because we're able to patron them. And bills get paid, mortgages get paid, banks are happy, everyone is happy when regular people are doing well. And I think there's a misunderstanding that, only 20% of the country is wealthy or rich. And I think we define that as, $250,000 or more, or whatever it is. That's 20% of the country. 1% is filthy rich. The rest of us are just regular people. I live in a 2-story house. I have a nice, community. I'm back by the hills. I consider myself working class because I don't own the home. And I'm in that generation that got shafted just like you, who it was much more difficult because when it came time to be able to buy a home, that Great Recession hit, and it was bad. We did not get the shining hill future that we were promised. So I can relate to some of that. Christina, I called on you just a second ago, and I don't know how much time we have left, but as far as final statements, I want to give you guys an opportunity to just, share your message to your supporters and your people. One last time, tell us what you would like people to know, and what you would like to say going into the final stretch of this election, with November coming up so close.
Sure. Well, I think that Joe Biden had it right when he said we were fighting for the soul of America. That really is what's at stake in this election. Like I said earlier, this isn't necessarily, if you are a moderate, if you're an independent, if you are recently questioning your allegiance to the Republican Party because of this president, this is a good time to really look at, it's not exactly about Democrat versus Republican right now. This is really about our values as a country. It's about life and death for many, many people. If you look at what has happened on the border, if you look at children who have been separated from their parents, children in camps and who have been exposed to COVID, and this and 140,000 Americans dead now because of the mishandling of this virus, and compare how other countries have handled this virus compared to the patchwork. I mean, in my own state of Arizona, where we had flattened the curve, and because our governor chose to listen to Trump and not to sound advice, we are now one of the hot spots of the entire world in my state. And I can go through example after example after example of this, but for many communities, racial divisions, the LGBT community, you can go down the list. It's really a life and death election, and there are people who are, a lot hangs in the balance, and our very soul of our nation does hang in the balance. I would encourage you to check out a blog that I wrote on our website, christiandems.org, about Joe Biden for such a time as this is the name, and it's why I endorse Biden personally. It's what I felt when I heard him speak towards the end of the Democratic primary, and what I really saw as a vision of what we can do as a country, and the next step that we can take forward to heal so much of the division that we have, and so many of the issues that have arisen over the last 3 years. And that's what our country needs now. We need healing, and we need a leader that can do that. And we need a time of that. So I encourage you to read that, share it if you feel that you agree with the message there. But yeah, to moderate, let's look at this as coming together right now as really saving our country. And to my Democratic brothers and sisters, let's continue to march forward and do all we can to ensure that we see a victory in 2020. And you can follow us at Christian Dems on Twitter. You can follow me at Christina of 9 on Twitter, and our website. Or thank you so much for having me and for bringing this together. We need to do more of this. We need to just do more roundtable and discussion and chatting. I think this is important.
It's an honor and a privilege, and I mean that with all sincerity. Lindy.
Hi.
Closing statement again for you. What would you like to say?
First, thank you so much again for bringing together so many dedicated and wonderful activists. It's the entire country, like all of you, you'd be in much better shape. And Chris, thank you again for taking the initiative and your leadership over the months. You're an incredible talent. I just think that, we can't rely on the polls. We fell for it in 2016, and Chris, as you mentioned, this is a completely different dynamic. At the same time, I think we should operate like we're 10, 15 points behind, because there's way too much at stake. But it's just heartbreaking to see loved ones suffer needlessly. All this is avoidable. So I am incredibly grateful to share this journey with all of you. Feel free to reach out if I can ever be helpful to you. And I'm sending you so much love. And I wish you and your family happiness during this tumultuous time.
And thank you so much for your tireless efforts with the Biden campaign and for your work in Pennsylvania in particular. On my Ancestry.com, I've got papers that show that we've got 4 generations back in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
That's incredible.
It's just the coolest thing in the world to me that my grandfather probably knew it or bumped into him or his family at some point at some time.
That's very cool. It's not a big town.
Yeah, well, my grandfather was a World War II veteran who served in the United States Navy. He was at Pearl Harbor. He served in
Oh, wow.
Japan. You know, and one thing I'll tell you about my grandfather that you know, this is on my father's side, the Irish side that is my namesake. He was very witty. He was very kind. He was a Democrat. He believed in fighting for the little guy. He was a Catholic, Irish Catholic. Had a great big family, and he lost his son and that lineage of Michaels that had been carried on since the 1600s when he was about 19, 20 years old. And so now we have Michaels everywhere. Even my son's middle name is Michael. CJ, closing arguments.
Yeah. So once again, I just want to thank you for, you know, subbing me in here and including me in this really, really important roundtable discussion. I think that we are really in a good spot as we're pushing into this election. I think it's important to keep our foot on the gas, not just up till January 20th when he's sworn in, but every day after that, and really ensuring that we recreate a vibrant two-party system of, you know, honorable and loyal opposition. And I think it's important to recreate the Republican Party in the image that it was before, and also pushing to ensure that the Democratic Party also represents as many people as it can. And so, as we move forward, I just want to thank you for including me. And you guys can follow us on Twitter at College GOP for Biden. Follow us on Instagram, College GOP for Biden. We're really always looking for new young recruits to put in their efforts to move the country forward. So thank you very much for having me. And I look forward to doing this again in the future.
Yes, and viewers, please follow them, College GOP for Biden. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us. It was an honor and privilege to have you. Jacquelyn and Jessica DRASS, Biden for President, closing statements. Obviously, you guys, don't have a separate organization to plug. Any final thoughts on, this final stretch, what you would like to say to the average American voter who may be moderate, Republican, conservative, Christian, disaffected Trump voters, disaffected Republicans? What would you like to say to them, guys?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for always having me. You're a great leader and activist. I want to thank everybody as well because I really didn't have much to say. Not because I didn't have an opinion on any topic, but I believe especially David and CJ, they were phenomenal.
Fantastic.
They touched on almost every single thing I could have even thought about, I could have had an opinion about, or felt any type of way about. So thank you to everyone, but definitely CJ and David gave me a lot to think about even after this meeting. I do want to say just to the voters and the viewers that it is very important to vote, and I'm just coming to the realization that it's important that we have a voice, we need to be heard, and in order to be heard, you have to vote.
Yep, that's your voice. Jess?
Well, yeah, of course, thank you for putting together such a unique experience of voices and ideas. And I always love, learning from other people and hearing what other people have to say. And I guess I'll just kind of close with my perspective as a mom of a third grade boy, and as a teacher, and as a researcher and a therapist. I look at what Joe Biden has to offer based on what he's been through and what he can acknowledge, and his humility, and my own personal experiences of getting to volunteer for him and meeting him numerous times. He's like an elephant. He doesn't forget. And he remembers every little effort that's a part of everything.
The important thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's not doing this for him. He doesn't have to do this. Like, he could be sitting there retiring and, he would still be a retired, admirable statesman. He saw a need that he was uniquely suited to fit. And so he's doing this in service to all of us. And so I asked the everyday American Joe or Jacquelyn, what can you do in service to the rest of your country? What can you do? What can you give? How can you break out of your comfort zone just a little bit so that we can all together have a better tomorrow?
Yeah, that's inspirational. Let's ask not what the Biden campaign can do for us, but what we can do for the Biden campaign. In the best interests of Republicans, moderates, liberals, Americans alike, first-generation immigrants and fourth or fifth-generation immigrants like my family. We all want to feel safe at night, and we all want to feel like everything is going to be okay, like Mr. ALMACY said. So thank you guys again. Of course, go to everydayamericanjoe.com to get free content, to hear more of these videos in the future, catch up on previous episodes where we've talked to different demographics. We're really trying to talk to everyone. We're this no one left behind. This time we're taking everyone with us. We really mean it, folks. We really want to make sure that we cover everyone and that all people are considered and respected and taken care of. Thank you guys again for taking the time, and let's go, Joe. We got to get out and vote, just like Jacquelyn said. We got to vote like we're 30 points down. We know we're 15 points ahead. This is the largest and longest and steadiest lead since 1940. Let's give the man some credit. He's doing a hell of a job, and we need to keep it up. We need to keep up the push and keep up that march so that they stay on the defensive and we stay leading, which is where we're at right now. We're in a position of leadership and Trump is following us. And I think that's fantastic. So let's keep it up. Great job, guys. Thank you for all that you do. And we'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks,
Have a good one.
guys.
Thank you.
TJ.
Bye,
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. And bye, America.